Hey, my name is Owen Mercer. I'm 31, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life arranged in a way that made sense. I designed commercial interiors, restaurants, small offices, cafes that want to feel expensive without spending like they're printing money. It's steady work. It doesn't ask me to be charming at parties or to post my face online. I like that. Then the company I'd been with for 6 years opened a new office in Portland and asked if I wanted to head the design team here. I said yes before I let myself think about what that actually meant. New city, new apartment, new everything. I told myself it was just geography. I was wrong about most things that week. The place I'd rented fell through on a Thursday afternoon. The landlord called while I was still on the highway, rain hammering the windshield, and said there was a small issue with the plumbing. The small issue turned out to be water pouring through the living room ceiling like the building had decided to take a shower. By the time I reached the city, the only thing I had left was a phone number from a coworker who swore his old roommate's place still had an empty room. I stood in front of apartment 3C with a cardboard box of dishes in my arms and rain dripping off my jacket. My phone said 7:42 p.m. I knocked once, then again when no one answered. The door opened. She was younger than I expected, late 20s maybe. Slim, dark hair past her shoulders, wearing a black sweater that looked 2 sizes too big and jeans that had seen better days. The first thing anyone would notice wasn't her eyes or the way she held herself. It was the scar. It ran from near her left temple down toward the corner of her mouth, a clean, pale line that caught the light from the hallway. It didn't make her ugly. It made her face impossible to look at casually. People would stare, then pretend they hadn't. I could already see she'd learned how to stand so that her hair fell forward on that side. She didn't smile. She didn't ask if I was lost. She just looked at the box in my arms like it might contain something that would make her evening worse. "You won't last a week living with me," she said. Her voice was flat, not angry, just stating a fact she'd already accepted. I shifted the box higher against my chest. My arms were starting to burn. "At least I know the room's still available," I answered. One of her eyebrows lifted, the smallest movement. She had clearly prepared for other reactions, awkward laughter, pity, some clumsy attempt to prove how open-minded they were. I didn't have the energy for any of that. I'd been driving for 9 hours in the rain. The box was cutting into my forearms. I just wanted somewhere to put it down. She studied me for another second, then stepped back and opened the door wider. "Rooms at the end of the hall, bathrooms on the right. Don't leave boxes in the walkway. Don't open the living room curtains without asking. Don't bring strangers over. No photos inside the apartment. No personal questions. And especially," she looked straight at me, "don't try to comfort me." I set the box down against the wall out of the way. "Got it." She narrowed her eyes like she was waiting for the rest of the speech. "That's it?" she asked. "Yeah. No speech about how I'm still beautiful? How I should be confident? How you don't even see the scar?" I looked at her, not at the scar, not away from it either, just at her. I was going to ask which cabinet the plates go in. For the first time, something in her face shifted. Not quite a smile. More like the beginning of one that got stopped halfway. "Second drawer from the left," she said. "Thanks." I carried the box into the kitchen and started unpacking. I could feel her watching me from the doorway. She wasn't trying to hide it. She was waiting for me to slip, for the glance that lingered too long, the question that came too soon, the careful performance of not looking that somehow looked worse than staring. After a minute, she spoke again. "You're not going to ask." "Ask what?" "About the scar." I placed a plate in the cabinet. "You'll tell me if it's something I need to know." "It's not something you need to know." I turned around. She was still standing in the same spot, one hand on the doorframe. "It's something you know," I said. "So I don't think I get to make it the first thing we talk about." The kitchen stayed quiet. She looked at me like she was trying to decide whether I was lying or just slow. Finally, she pointed at the cabinet above the sink. "Cups go there. Don't put them on the top shelf. I hate having to ask someone to reach them." "Noted." And don't say just ask me, I've heard that one. I was going to say I'm short enough that I hate the top shelf too. This time she actually laughed. It was short, almost surprised, like it had escaped before she could stop it. That night we ate takeout at opposite ends of the kitchen table. She'd ordered extra without asking if I was hungry. Between us were scattered sheets of design work, book covers, posters, color swatches. I glanced at one that showed a small house with a door cracked open, light leaking out into fog. "That one yours?" I asked. She immediately gathered the papers and stacked them face down. "Work. You're a designer?" "Freelance. Book covers, posters, branding for small presses, mostly email." I looked at the stack. "You use negative space really well." She studied me for a long moment. "You know about design?" "A little. I do commercial interiors, restaurants, small offices. Not the same thing, but enough to recognize when someone's being deliberate with empty space." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. "Most people just say it looks nice." Nice is what people say when they don't know what they're looking at. She didn't smile, but the sharpness around her eyes eased by a fraction. Later, after I'd carried the rest of my boxes into the small room at the end of the hall, she stood in the doorway while I tried to make sense of the mess. "I've had 4 roommates in 3 years," she said. "None of them stayed long." "Did you ask them to leave?" "Some of them. One kept opening the living room curtains because he said natural light was good for mental health. Another brought his girlfriend over and didn't realize I could hear her ask if living with the girl with the scar was as weird as it sounded. One tried so hard not to look at me that it was worse than staring. I didn't know what the right answer was, so I told the truth. "Sounds exhausting." She looked at me like that wasn't the response she'd been ready for. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It is." I nodded. "I don't know how good I'll be at this, but I'm not planning on leaving tomorrow morning." She watched me for a long time. Then she turned and walked back down the hall. Before she closed her door, she spoke without looking back. "Don't leave boxes in front of the bathroom." "Got it." Her door clicked shut. I sat on the edge of the mattress that still had plastic on it and listened to the rain against the window. My arms ached from carrying boxes. My shirt was still damp at the shoulders. I should have felt relieved to finally have a place to sleep. Instead, I kept thinking about the way she'd looked when I didn't ask about the scar. Like she'd been holding her breath for a question that never came. I didn't know if I'd last a week. I didn't even know if I wanted to, but I knew I wasn't ready to leave yet. And that, I was starting to understand, might be the most dangerous thing about Elise Hart. By the third morning, Elise had started testing me. She came into the kitchen while I was making coffee, hair pulled back higher than usual so the scar caught the overhead light. She didn't say anything at first, just opened the fridge and stood there like she was waiting for me to react. I poured a second cup without being asked and set it on the counter near her. "You want coffee?" She turned, surprised for half a second before she covered it. "That's it?" "I can ask if you want milk too, if you need more drama." She looked at me for another moment, then took the cup. Black. No sugar. She stared into it like the coffee had personally offended her. "I don't need sugar." "Nobody said you did. I just said your coffee looks like it's holding a grudge." Her shoulders moved once, almost a laugh, but she turned away before it could become anything real. She kept testing me in small ways after that. Some mornings she would walk through the living room with her hair tied up, scar fully visible, and I would keep my eyes on whatever I was doing. Other times she would eat with her face angled toward the wall like she was daring me to comment. Once she said, flat and cold, "You don't have to pretend you're comfortable. Everyone sees it eventually." I answered without looking up from my phone. "I'm more worried about the fact that you're eating cereal with a fork right now." She paused, looked down at her hand, and frowned. "I grabbed the wrong one. I'm going to remember this day for the rest of my life." She didn't laugh out loud, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch before she turned away. I learned things about her anyway. She was good at what she did. Really good. Her desk stayed buried under sketches and printed proofs, and the way she handled negative space on book covers made me stop and look longer than I meant to. She worked almost entirely through email. No video calls, no client meetings, no events. A few projects didn't even have her full name on them, just the initials EH. One afternoon, I was standing at the sink when I saw a cover design on her screen. A small house at night, door cracked open, warm light spilling onto fog. It felt like the image was holding its breath. "The door's good," I said. She spun around in her chair. "The door? Yeah, it's not open all the way. It's not closed either. Makes you wonder if the person inside is scared to leave or scared someone's about to come in." She stared at the screen, then at me. "You're not going to say the colors are nice? The colors are nice, but the door's what makes people stay and look." She didn't answer for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. "The client wants it brighter, more commercial. Are you going to do it?" "Maybe. I think you shouldn't." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been here 3 days and you're already giving me art direction? I pay rent by the month. My opinions come with a corresponding price tag." She laughed then, short but real. After that, she stopped hiding her work quite as quickly when I walked past. She didn't invite me to look, but she didn't flip the screen away either. I took it as the smallest possible version of trust. Then came the night it rained hard enough to sound like the sky was trying to wash the city off the map. I got home late. When I stepped into the kitchen, Elise was sitting at the table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. The apartment was darker than usual, curtains pulled tight. Only the light above the stove was on. "Bad day?" I asked. "You're asking personal questions." "I'm asking about the weather inside the apartment." She looked at me. I opened the cabinet for a glass. "You don't have to answer." I was about to take the glass and go to my room when she spoke again. "The accident happened when I was 23. My hand stopped on the cabinet door. I didn't turn around right away. I didn't want to startle whatever had made her decide to say it. "Yeah," I said. She kept her eyes on the table. Car hydroplaned, glass everywhere. I don't remember much after that, just waking up and my mother crying and the doctor saying they did what they could with the stitches. I sat down across from her, leaving space. She didn't look at me. At first I thought it would be like in movies. Surgery, bandages, then everything goes back to normal. But faces don't heal like torn shirts. People look at the damage before they look at you. She swallowed. Old friends said they didn't notice. Then I heard them telling other people it was such a shame because I used to be pretty. Someone at a cafe once took a photo of me without asking and posted it with the caption, "When filters can't save real life." My hand tightened under the table. She saw it. "Don't make that face." "What face?" "The one that wants to hurt someone politely." "I have more than one face." "No, yours is pretty easy to read." I let out a slow breath. "Your ex was Damon?" She lifted her head. "I don't remember saying his name." "You had a sketch torn up in the trash. On the back it said, 'Damon said, make it softer.'" I guessed it wasn't a compliment. She gave a tired smile. "Damon used to say he loved my soul, that the scar didn't change anything, that other people were shallow and he wasn't like them. Then he started asking me to cover it with my hair when we went out, to wear more makeup, to stay out of bright light and photos. At one party, he left me standing by the kitchen because his friends kept staring. On the way home, he said I made everyone uncomfortable. I stayed quiet. Some things need silence more than they need answers." Elise kept going. "The worst part was overhearing him tell someone, 'Dating a girl with a scar takes a lot of courage.'" The rain hit the window harder. She laughed without sound. After that, I understood. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was proof that he was a good person. A story he could tell to feel deeper than he actually was. I looked at her. "He wasn't brave," I said. She met my eyes. "He just liked being told he was." She held my gaze for a long time. Something in her face opened and then closed again, like she wasn't sure whether to let the words settle or push them away. After that night, things shifted in small ways. She started making coffee for both of us in the mornings. The first time, my cup was already waiting on the counter when I came out. She didn't mention it. I didn't either. I fixed the loose switch on her desk lamp after asking first. She told me if I electrocuted myself, she would tell the landlord I did it on purpose. I said that seemed fair. We ate dinner together more often. She still made sharp comments. I still answered dryly. One evening, she tied her hair up while we were both in the apartment. Not all the way back, but enough that the scar showed. She didn't check my reaction. She just kept eating. I understood she was still waiting. Waiting for day 7. Waiting for me to find a reason. Work was too busy. The space felt wrong. Living with someone was more complicated than I thought. Something polite that would let her stay angry at the world instead of disappointed in another person who couldn't handle her. I didn't give her that reason. I just stayed. And sometimes I think that scared her more than if I had left. On the 6th day, Elise got an email that changed the air in the apartment. I knew it wasn't ordinary because she read it 3 times, then closed her laptop like the screen had said something insulting. We were at the kitchen table. I was halfway through a sandwich. She had her usual black coffee, though I'd noticed she'd started adding half a teaspoon of sugar when she thought I wasn't looking. Bad news? I asked. Good news. You're reacting to good news like someone just raised your taxes. She pushed the laptop toward me without a word. It was an invitation to a small design exhibition in Portland focused on independent book covers and posters. A senior editor from Northline Press would be there. They had seen some of her work and wanted her to present in person. It wasn't just exposure. If it went well, it could mean a real contract, something that would take her work beyond endless email threads and anonymous files. Sounds like a big deal, I said. Yeah. So why do you look like you're planning your own funeral? She closed the laptop. I'm going to decline. I didn't answer right away. She was watching me, already prepared for the usual lines people give in moments like this. You have to be brave. Don't let the scar stop you. Just be confident. I could see the defenses already loading behind her eyes. Instead, I asked, because you don't want to go or because you're scared? Her expression sharpened. Are those different? Yeah, one's a choice. The other's a prison pretending to be a choice. She went quiet. I picked up my sandwich and kept eating, giving her space to hate the sentence. After a while, she spoke again, voice tighter than before. I hate being looked at. I know. No, you don't. She leaned forward, hands flat on the table. You don't know what it feels like to walk into a room and watch people's eyes slide across your face and then stick. You don't know what it's like when they try so hard to act normal that it feels worse than staring. You don't know what it's like to wonder if someone's taking a picture, sending it to their friends, turning you into a story they'll tell later. I set the sandwich down. You're right. I don't know it the way you do. She seemed surprised that I didn't try to take the pain away from her or make it smaller. I continued. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. If you don't want to go, don't go. But if you want to go and you're scared, I can drive you. She gave a short, bitter laugh. So you can shield me? No. So you can fight anyone who looks at me? I'm not great at fighting. I'm mostly good at knocking people over with chairs. She glared, but the edge in her eyes softened. I'm not offering to protect you, I said. I'm offering to go so you remember you have the right to be there. She looked down at her hands. What if people stare? People staring doesn't mean you have to disappear. The kitchen went still. I stood up and cleared my plate. Whether you go or not is your decision. I can have the car ready. If you change your mind and want to leave halfway through, I'll take you home. If you want to stay, I'll stand somewhere nearby. Either way, it's your call. I left her alone after that. For the rest of the day, she moved through the apartment like she was arguing with herself. She opened her closet, tried on a blouse, took it off, put her hair up, then let it fall forward again. She stood in the bathroom for almost 20 minutes at one point, just looking at her reflection. I didn't offer compliments. I didn't tell her she was brave or that the scar didn't matter. Those sentences are easy to say and hard to believe when you've heard them too many times from people who just wanted you to stop being difficult. Instead, I laid out my jacket, checked that the car had gas, and left a bottle of water on the table near her bag. Close to the time we needed to leave, she came out of her room. She had chosen a dark green blouse and black pants. Her hair was still partly covering the left side of her face, but not completely. Her shoulders were tight, like she was walking into a courtroom instead of a small exhibition. I looked at her and said the only thing that felt honest. Your work deserves to be seen. She met my eyes. What about me? The question was quiet, but it carried weight. I could have said the easy thing, you deserve it too. I could have given her a dozen reassuring lines. But Elise had already heard too many people tell her what she should feel. I didn't want to be another one. So I answered, you do too. But I think you need to be the one who says it to yourself more than you need to hear it from me. For a second, her eyes went glassy. She turned away quickly and picked up her bag. Do you always answer like that? Like what? Like it's inconvenient to be kind. I call it being honest. I call it annoying. Also fair. On the drive there, she sat with her hands clasped in her lap, fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against her thumb. I kept the music low. I didn't try to fill the silence with conversation. She needed the quiet. Halfway to the venue, she asked, do you think I'm being stupid? For going? For being scared. I kept my eyes on the road. No, I think you're doing something difficult while being scared. Those aren't the same thing as stupid. She exhaled slowly and turned to look out the window. Portland passed by in wet streaks of light and rain. A few minutes later, she spoke again, almost to herself. Okay, just one word. But I heard everything she wasn't saying inside it. The exhibition was held in an old warehouse that had been turned into an event space. Exposed brick, concrete floors, and low-hanging industrial lights. It wasn't crowded, but for Elise, it might as well have been a stadium. When we walked in, her whole body went rigid. I stayed close without touching her. No hand on her back, no guiding. Just near enough that she could feel I was there if she needed me. Breathe, I said quietly. I am breathing. Sounds more like you're negotiating with your lungs. She shot me a sideways look. Can you be quietly supportive for once? Sure. I stayed silent. 5 seconds later, she muttered, that's somehow worse. I'm versatile. She almost smiled. That small, reluctant, almost smile pulled her back into her body a little. At first, she stayed near the corner where her work was displayed. When people approached, she answered their questions in short, careful sentences. Then a woman in her 50s stopped in front of one of Elise's posters, the one with the cracked open door and light leaking into fog. Are you E.H.? The woman asked. Elise hesitated for half a second. Yes, Elise Hart. The woman smiled warmly. I'm Marion Cole from Northline Press. I've been following your covers for June Avery's books. The way you use space is very distinctive. Your work doesn't just look good. It feels like it has something to say. I saw Elise's shoulders drop a fraction. That was what she needed. Not compliments about her face or her courage. Someone actually seeing the work. She started talking. Slowly at first, then with more certainty. She explained how a good cover shouldn't give away the whole story, how it should feel like a door. Open enough to invite someone in, closed enough to keep some secrets. Marion listened like she was actually interested, not just being polite. I stood a few steps away, close enough to hear, far enough not to crowd her. This was her moment. I wasn't going to step into it. Then I saw her face change. I turned. Damon walked in with 3 other people. I'd never seen him before, but I recognized the type immediately, someone who moved like the past still owed him something. Expensive coat, perfect hair, a smile that looked practiced. When he spotted Elise, he stopped, then headed straight toward her. Elise? She froze. Damon looked around at her displayed work like he was surprised she actually belonged there. Didn't expect to see you at something like this. Big crowd and everything. The way he said it made it sound like a concern. It wasn't. Elise didn't answer. He kept going, voice light but sharp underneath. Brave of you. I remember how much you hated people looking at you. One of the guys with him laughed quietly. Another one stared at Elise's scar for too long. Then I noticed the third one slowly raising his phone, angling it toward her. I stepped forward before I even thought about it. "Delete that," I said. The guy blinked. "I didn't take anything." "Then it'll be very easy to prove. Open your photos." Damon let out a short laugh. "And who are you supposed to be, her new bodyguard?" I looked at him. "No, I'm just standing next to someone who doesn't deserve to be turned into entertainment." Damon gave me a slow once-over. "New roommate?" Elise stayed silent. I didn't answer for her. Damon smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good luck. She's difficult to live with, sensitive, turns everything into a problem. At first you'll feel noble for putting up with it. Then you'll get tired like the rest of us." I felt anger rise, but I didn't let it turn into a performance. I turned to Elise instead. She was shaking. Her eyes kept flicking toward the exit. I knew she wanted to leave. If she said the word, I would take her home right now without hesitation. I asked, "Do you want to go or do you want to finish what you came here to do?" She looked at me. There was fear in her eyes and shame and anger, but there was also something else. Recognition that I wasn't deciding for her. I wasn't pulling her out to play the hero. I was giving the choice back to her. She looked over at her work. Marion was still standing there, watching quietly, not leaving. Damon crossed his arms like he already knew how this would end. Elise took a slow breath. Her voice came out shaky but clear. "I want to finish." I nodded. "Okay." The guy with the phone finally opened his gallery and deleted the photo while I watched. I didn't say anything else. Elise walked back to her display. For the first time that night, she reached up and tucked her hair behind her left ear. The scar caught the light. People noticed. Of course they did. The world doesn't suddenly become kind just because someone decides to stop hiding. But Elise didn't disappear. She stood in front of her work and started speaking. Her voice trembled at first. "I used to think design was about making things look better by hiding what was broken." The small crowd around her quieted. She continued, "The longer I do this, the more I think design shouldn't hide the truth. It should give the truth a shape that people can look at directly." I stayed behind her. My chest felt tight. Elise pointed at the poster with the half-open door. "A good book cover doesn't pretend the story inside is comfortable. It just needs to be honest enough that the reader believes if they step through, they'll find something real." Marion's expression changed. Interested, almost moved. More people had gathered. Damon stood farther back now, his earlier confidence gone. He looked smaller. When Elise finished, Marion stepped forward and shook her hand. "I'd like to talk to you about a longer-term contract." Elise stood completely still for a second. "Really? Really? I think you have something a lot of designers are missing. You don't just make images, you understand what it feels like to be seen and what it feels like to want to be understood. That shows up in your work." Elise didn't cry, but her eyes were bright. Damon left a few minutes later, no apology, no dramatic exit. Just a man who realized he no longer had the power to make her smaller. When the exhibition ended, we stood outside under the light rain. Elise had her hands in her coat pockets. She looked exhausted and strangely lighter at the same time. "I thought I was going to run," she said. "I know." "You didn't stop me." "That wasn't my right." She turned to look at me. Rain was catching in her hair. "But you stayed anyway." I met her eyes. "That was my choice." She looked away, but not before I caught the smallest smile at the corner of her mouth. We got back to the apartment late. Elise turned on the standing lamp in the living room, the one she usually kept off because the light hit her face at an angle she didn't like. She didn't say anything about it. She just flipped the switch and let the room stay brighter than usual. She took off her coat, set her bag on the floor, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time without speaking. Her hair was still tucked behind her left ear. The scar was fully visible under the kitchen light. There was no audience now, no Damon, no publisher. Just the two of us and the sound of rain still tapping against the windows. She looked down at her hands. "The thing I was most afraid of wasn't the scar," she said eventually. I sat across from her and waited. She kept her eyes on the table. It was the way people looked at me, like I was something to pity or something to be afraid of, or something to praise just for showing up. I stayed quiet. Some days I don't hate my face, she continued. Then I go outside and someone stares too long, and I remember how to hate it all over again. I didn't tell her to stop caring what people thought. I didn't tell her she had to love the scar. Those were easy things to say when you weren't the one carrying it. Instead, I said, you don't have to love it today, but you don't have to let the people who hurt you decide how you're allowed to exist either. She closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her face, but she didn't collapse. It wasn't the kind of crying that came from being broken. It was the kind that came from finally being able to breathe. The next morning was day 7. I walked into the kitchen still half asleep, hair messy, expecting to make coffee like usual. But there were already 2 cups on the table. Elise was sitting there, hair tied low at the back of her neck. The scar showed clearly in the morning light. She didn't try to hide it. She looked up when I came in. So you lasted a week. I picked up the cup she had made for me. No. She raised an eyebrow. No? I've only just started learning how to live here. She watched me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Small, tired, but real. The kind of smile that didn't need to be performed for anyone. We didn't fall in love that morning. That mattered. A rushed version of the story would have turned day 7 into some kind of romantic victory. Like staying 1 week and going to 1 exhibition and standing up to 1 ex was enough to understand what it meant to love Elise Hart. I didn't understand everything yet. I just understood more than I had on the first day. And I wanted to keep learning. In the months that followed, things changed slowly. Elise started doing video calls with clients. The first time, she sat in front of her laptop for 10 full minutes with the camera off before she finally turned it on. I didn't stand behind her cheering like a coach. I just made coffee in the kitchen so she would know the apartment was still just an apartment. She began going out more. At first it was only with me, to the grocery store, to the bookstore down the block. Later she went alone. One afternoon she came back from a small design workshop and spent 20 minutes complaining that one of the other designers used a terrible font. I asked if that meant the workshop had been a success. She paused, then admitted quietly that she had stayed until the end. She posted her first work photo that actually showed her face. Not a full portrait, just a shot of her at her desk with the light coming from the side, scar visible, but not the center of the image. Most of the comments were about the design. A few were cruel. She deleted those without hesitation and kept the post up. I never turned her progress into proof of my own goodness. I didn't say, see, I told you. I didn't act like I had fixed something. Elise wasn't a project. She wasn't a room that needed renovating. She was Elise. And Elise had always deserved to be seen. The first time she let me kiss her was a few months later in the same small kitchen. We had spent 15 minutes arguing about whether a pendant light I'd specified for a restaurant was hung too low. She said tall customers were at risk of injury. I said it was intentional immersion. She told me I wasn't allowed to use the word immersion to justify bad design. Then she went quiet and looked at me. Owen. Yeah? I want to kiss you. I stayed still. Because I fixed the light? Don't ruin the moment. Okay. She stepped closer. No hair covering her face, no performance, no gratitude, no treating me like I had rescued her. Just a woman choosing a man. I asked, can I? She nodded. The kiss wasn't cinematic. There was no music swelling and no perfectly timed rain against the windows. There was only the smell of coffee, the hum of the old refrigerator, and her fingers brushing lightly against my wrist like she was making sure I was actually there. A year later, we moved into a larger apartment across the river. It had 2 proper bedrooms, a kitchen big enough for 2 people to cook without constantly bumping into each other, and a room with good natural light that became Elise's studio. My books slowly migrated onto shelves next to her design annuals. We still argued about fonts and lighting angles, but now we did it while making dinner. In her studio hangs a large poster she designed herself. It's a self-portrait. No hair covering her face, no turned-away angle, No attempt to hide or soften the scar. It's just her, looking straight ahead. The scar is there, but it doesn't dominate the image. It's simply part of the whole. One evening, a new friend asked me why I loved her. I looked across the room. Elise was on a video call with a client, one hand moving as she spoke, hair pulled back, the scar catching the late afternoon light. She didn't look like someone who had been completely healed. I don't think anyone ever is. But she looked like someone who had stopped asking the world for permission to take up space. I answered, I love her because she's Elise, and I hate that the world once made her believe that wasn't enough. The friend stayed quiet for a moment. I added, also, she has very strong opinions about typography. From across the room, without turning around, Elise said, I heard that. I know. And I'm right about the fonts. I know that too. She smiled. She didn't cover her face. She didn't look away. And I thought about the first night I stood in front of apartment 3C with rain in my jacket and a box of dishes in my arms, when she opened the door and told me I wouldn't last a week living with her. She had been wrong. Not because living with Elise was easy, but because staying with the right person was never about enduring them. It was about learning how to see them completely. The parts that were beautiful, the parts that were sharp, the parts that were still healing, and choosing every morning to put your coffee cup next to theirs anyway.